All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to our second session this morning for the TUP Energy Conference. My name is Etta Cosma. I'm a graduate student at the Fletcher School here at TUP, and we're really pleased that we could join us for this panel on small island energy challenges. I'm going to turn it over to the panel coordinator, Archie, to tell you a little bit more.
Thanks, Anna. And good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us, joining us at what is going to be the last panel of the TUP Energy Conference 2023. I'm very excited. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We are recording this panel. And for those joining online, please place any questions you have in the chat box and we will incorporate them during the Q&A session. A little about the panel and how we came about it. With it, we thought that the unique challenges that islands face are not talked about a whole lot. And now with the loss and damage, I think there's increased attention on what the future energy and climate will look like for small island states. Their unique challenges include maintaining energy reliability and resilience. And of course, there's a difference between the Caribbean islands and the Pacific islands, with the Caribbean islands facing the impact of extreme weather events and Indo-Pacific islands facing more of the slow onset climate impacts and how that impacts their energy. And in terms of the energy transition itself, again, the small islands face specific challenges, financial constraints, of course, and the innovation constraints, but in a more obvious order, we have space constraints. And renewable energy tends to be very space intensive. So there's a question to be asked, what kind of technological innovations can we support that will enable them to transition from the energy that they have currently to what will be needed as we move forward. So we've tried to put together a diverse panel for you that brings together voices from government, technology, and finance, and what will be, we hope, a very exciting conversation, moderated by Andrew Freedman, a Fletcher alum and senior reporter at Axios. Andrew is an award-winning reporter with over 15 years of experience covering global climate change, extreme weather events, national politics, energy and space news. His work incorporates innovative coverage of the intersection between extreme weather events and climate change. At present, he's, as I mentioned, a senior climate reporter at Axios. And for those who are familiar, I'm sure, with the Axios Generate, he is the author and he is one of the best newsletters out there on energy and climate. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And Andrew, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Just give me a thumbs up on the panel. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Sorry I couldn't be there in person due to some travel to an energy conference later this weekend, and wanted to stay married with my 8-year-old at home, and can only leave a single parent household for so long. But I'm really excited about this panel. I think that having talked to small island leaders at UN climate negotiations, especially at COP27 and in particular, their individual challenges should really be talked about and thought about, part of the broader conversation, but a little bit separately, because they are unique. So I'm just going to introduce the panel bios, and then we'll go to one person, the first person who's going to kick it off in terms of a brief presentation. I will say, like everybody on the panel, just know that your opening comments should leave time, as much time as possible, for panel questions and discussion and questions from the room. So first is Max Lainfiesta, Senior Associate with the RMI Global South Program, Island Energy Program. Been a Senior Associate at the Rocky Mountain Institute's Island Energy Program for the past 3 years. Has a PhD in Sustainable Energy Systems Engineering at the University of Texas A&M. Has a lot of knowledge in microgrids, installation of small to large scale uninterrupted power supplies, and also working on battery storage systems, energy efficiency, small scale wind in the developing world. He's involved in the energy challenges of Puerto Rico, particularly promoting low interest loans for the building of microgrids across the island. To add to his underachievements, he is a Fulbright scholar and holds an MS in renewable energy from Galileo University of Guatemala. Second panelist, who's going to actually start things off, is Juan Carlos Méndez, who's been working in law focused on corporate energy and government affairs for the past 15 years. He was Puerto Rico's Secretary of the Treasury from 2005 to 2007. And in that capacity, implemented the fiscal, tax, and financial policies of Puerto Rico. Most of the work that he does today revolves around facilitating transactions and major developments in the renewable energy sector, as well as acting as the intermediary between governments and private actors in negotiating power purchase agreements. He has in-depth knowledge of the political and economic developments underpinning Puerto Rico's recent energy and climate issues, of which there are many, as well as a unique perspective on where the private sector in particular fits into possible solutions to making that island more resilient. We also have with us Alyssa Peterson, co-founder and executive director of the group See Ahead, a business development and strategy professional and the co-founder of the Blue Tech Innovation Corporation, See Ahead, which is Cambridge-based. It supports ocean-based new venture development at the intersection of innovation and sustainability. She has a mechanical engineering master's from MIT and worked for McKinsey & Company's global sustainability practice in the US and Europe. She was a product development advisor for the California-based grid-scale battery technology company Primus Power. And before co-founding See Ahead, she served as the VP for planning and marketing at NanoSteel, an advanced materials company. And TeAnn Thomas, Deputy Permanent Secretary for the Turks and Caicos Islands government. She was selected to serve as Deputy Permanent Secretary last year. Before this, she spent 8 years as a resource planning and utilities analyst for Fortis TCI, which is the foremost public electricity supplier of the Turks and Caicos. So she has resource planning, renewable energy, data and analytics expertise, and emerging green technologies, primarily in the energy sector. Her educational, and that's awesome that is going off. Her educational background is in economics. She currently holds both a master's in development economics from Dalhousie University and a bachelor's in economics from Mount St. Vincent University. She has a depth of experience managing public and private stakeholders. In the Turks and Caicos, as well as dealing with natural disasters and the maintenance of a more reliable electricity grid. So I welcome all the panelists, those who did get to make it to the Fletcher School. I am jealous. I miss the hill. I miss campus there. And we're going to start off with Mr. Méndez, who has a presentation that he prepared, and then we can go to we'll hopscotch around to some of the other panelists for opening statements before we get into Q&A and audience.
Thank you, Andrew. Hopefully those panelists joining us remotely can you hear me well? My name is Juan Carlos Méndez. As Andrew mentioned, I'm a lawyer practicing corporate and energy law in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I would like to thank Tufts University and the organizers of this conference for the opportunity to share my thoughts and experience in working in the development of energy infrastructure in Puerto Rico, and in particular the challenges that we face as an island, which include among others natural disasters, geography, permitting, and the lack of financing. I'm going to start. I have a very short presentation, just 4 slides. I try not to overextend too much. Where should I point? There? See, okay, that's the first one. Perfect. This is a picture taken by NASA that shows an island, Puerto Rico, that is completely electrified. That was possible thanks to a massive investment by the government-owned public utility company called the Puerto Rico Electric and Power Authority, known as by its acronym as PREPA. PREPA was created in 1941 and was very successful in creating and building the generation and TECs, transmission and distribution infrastructure that we have today. However, like most utilities, in order to make this investment, they had to raise money in the bond market. And due to changes in Puerto Rico's demographics, loss of population, loss of industrial clients, big industrial clients, and of course, bad management decisions throughout the years, well, PREPA ended up filing for bankruptcy in 2017. And ever since, it has been trying to restructure its debt that amounts to roughly $9 billion. Okay. While in bankruptcy, PREPA is currently negotiating a concession to privatize its power generation plants, which substantially depend on fossil fuels. However, there has been efforts by the local government to introduce and promote the introduction of renewable energy. In recent years, there has been a decent amount of investment in renewable energy. And it all began in 2010 with the implementation of Act 82 and Act 83, in which the government set its aspirational goals for the diversification of energy through alternate and renewable energy sources, and also created investment incentives in order to achieve those goals. And there you can see, that by 2025, we're supposed to have 40% of the total generation of energy in Puerto Rico should be from renewable sources, and then get up to 100% by 2050. Also, the government declared energy state of emergency, which triggers some special statutes that allow for the fast tracking of permitting process, the permit process for renewable. Okay, so it was a strategy that included three sets of ideas. First, setting goals, then getting tax incentives for developers, and lastly, fast tracking the permitting process. Right now, only about 5% of the 6,000 megawatt total generation comes from either wind or solar or hydro. However, there are power purchase agreements already signed for the development of an additional 800 megawatts of solar PV systems. Puerto Rico has been perhaps too slow in integrating renewable energy technology to its power generation system. And as of today, PREPA is way off the mark, obviously, to achieve that 40% goal. Finally, I would like to talk a lot about a project that I was involved with since its inception. It's called Punta Lima Wind Farm, right there. It's a beautiful project comprised of 13 wind turbines for a total output of roughly 26 megawatts. It is located on the eastern shore of the island overlooking the Vieques Sound. If you have been to Puerto Rico, that's a fabulous, very pretty place. Construction was finalized in 2012, and since then it successfully sold the energy it produced to PREPA. Then in 2017, Hurricane Maria landed in Puerto Rico as a category 5 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 175. There you go. 175 miles per hour. Maria was a deadly hurricane that completely decimated Punta Lima wind farm. A nearby 40 megawatt solar project suffered a similar fate. And currently this wind farm is under reconstruction, but not until after the owners face many years of negotiations with lenders, insurance companies, and the government. So, Punta Lima is a reminder that although utility scale renewable projects are important in our efforts to reduce fuel emissions and tackle climate change, they are not exempt from the effects of natural disasters, as every other energy infrastructure is. Okay, on an island that is prone to hurricanes, well, it presents a major challenge for the future. So that's it. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have later.
Thank you. That was really interesting and striking photographs of the wind turbines, and a really good reminder of the need to be resilient in all our infrastructure, not just electricity transmission. So next we'll go to we can go to Max for any introductory words you may want to make. Thanks.
Definitely. I hope everyone can hear me. Great. So yeah, hi everyone. Max Lainfiesta from Guatemala here. I work for the Rocky Mountain Institute. And well, my everyday work is around deploying and installing more renewable energy in the island nations, especially in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. What we do is we create techno-financial models, and we implement blended finance solutions so we can help people, especially in low and middle income communities, acquire renewable, mostly PV and battery systems, people that will normally be unable to get this type of technology. In Puerto Rico, what we do is we use philanthropic capital, philanthropic money, basically gift money, to help critical facilities that provide critical service to the communities. For example, the town pharmacy, the town supermarket, the town gas station, where everyone goes when there is a disaster. For example, we try to get them to have a solar system that will reduce their energy burden, their payments for electricity monthly, and also we try to give them resiliency so they can keep providing their services in the event of natural disaster. In the Dominican Republic, we helped catalyze a strong coalition of financial institutions and other actors, installers, associations of installers, and we are working with the government to repurpose the $2 billion energy subsidy that they pay and have been paying for many years. And we want the government to use that money to, instead of subsidize electricity, help people install solar systems at home, especially low to middle income communities. And we will achieve the same results, get their electric bill to lower, but also we will help disappear the energy subsidy. So I know we have just a little time, but happy to discuss later. Thanks. Andrew, back to you.
Thanks, Max. Appreciate those remarks. Next, we'll go to Alyssa Peterson.
Hi, Alyssa Peterson. As noted earlier, I'm co-founder of an organization called See Ahead, and we work with companies that have an impact on ocean health and on sustainable ocean industries. And so we support startups through the concept through Series A stages of development. We're headquartered in Cambridge, just in the CIC at Kendall Square, and our sort of mission in life is to support ventures that are trying to get off the ground that will have the ability to scale, and by having that scale, have the ability to make major future impacts. So our focus areas include offshore renewable energy, and the focus right now is largely in offshore wind, and we can talk about why that is if that's of interest to you. And we also focus on areas like fisheries and aquaculture, coastal resilience, ocean-related climate change mitigation tactics, and ports and shipping. All of these are related in ways that are probably not obvious, like just on the outset, right? A lot of times people say, well, why don't you just focus on one industry? Or like, why not just, offshore wind, or why not just maritime space? And the reason we do that is because we believe firmly that, our goal is to help startups scale. And oftentimes there are unexpected intersections and many different customers for those companies that we can help them identify, because we understand those different kinds of customer sets and can help them to get to bigger scale and sometimes faster, depending on which market is willing to move first. So I do not have a ton of experience in small island states, but I will do my very best to offer some, insights into the way that startups and technology is developing. And I will turn the small island states questions over to my colleagues here.
Awesome. Thank you. Very cool. Next, we'll go to TeAnn Thomas.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Let me first apologize for not being able to make it in person, but I bring greetings from the warm and sunny, beautiful Turks and Caicos Islands to all of you. It is a pleasure to sit on this panel today. And as was mentioned, prior to starting this job in government, I worked in the electricity sector for over 8 years. And the last 5 of those years, I have worked specifically on clean energy projects with the electricity service provider on the islands. So most notably, one of those projects would have been the Resilient National Energy Transition Strategy, or as we call it, the RNETS, which was in collaboration with the government as well as RMI, being our independent facilitator. So pretty much what that is just a robust version of an integrated resource plan, moving away from how we traditionally plan for energy overall, incorporating more of a resilience component, as we see it's very much needed. So pretty much what that sought to address was the clean energy transition for the entire energy sector for the TCI. And given that the clean energy transition is still pretty new in the TCI, there exists many opportunities for capacity building, especially as we start to streamline regulations to support clean energy and bolster the local renewable energy industry to take on the same. So now in my capacity in a government role, I now am charged with that mandate. So I have a utility and a government experience now, but I would note that the utility service provider is privately owned. So, and the government serves as the regulator. So that's the structure right now. So as I mentioned, this is a new market for the TCI, and a lot of what is being done now will inform and guide project preparation for clean energy projects. It also provides opportunities to build skills and expertise in projects to grow the industry, whether through pilot projects or full-scale initiatives. I think we are well aware that now is the time. We would be too late if we haven't started already. And just to wrap up, I would say that I believe clean energy means the preservation of livelihoods and a sustainable energy future for all. So what we do now to advance clean energy in the Turks and Caicos Islands will have a long-lasting impact on the generations to come and the preservation of those generations to live, work, and grow. So the decisions that we make now, same as the generations before, it's affecting us now. And so what we do now will affect generations to come. So I look forward to an exciting panel discussions, open to any questions you may have. I will answer as best as I can. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm very jealous of the weather where you are right now. As well as in Guatemala too. First question, anybody can jump in first if they wish. You know, one of the things that you learn quickly when researching islands, especially small island states, and their energy sources, is the reliance on diesel generators and fuel-based electricity generation, at least in the past and very recent past. And we're trying to change that. But I'm curious how those issues are felt by people in everyday lives, and to what extent there are racial and other environmental justice issues that come into play here.
Okay, I'll jump in since it's not assigned a question. So I would say there is a very high reliance on diesel generation for the production of electricity on the island. That is what is being used, diesel. And just for background, the Turks and Caicos Islands is an archipelago of islands. So it's made up of several islands. And in that you have independent systems on each island. So it's not an interconnected grid sort of situation. So you have the grids throughout the island. So that just compounds the diesel generation that is being used. And what that pretty much translates to is a very high cost of energy for persons. And that is felt every day. It has been expressed even more so now as the fuel factor has constantly been rising due to the cost of fuel in the world market. And, you know, we are takers, we don't impact that. So a large portion, so we're at the point now where a large portion of the average person's income is going to electricity. And so for the everyday person, the question comes down to, you know, choosing which utility I will pay for or have this month, because if I'm on minimum wage and a large portion of my income is going to electricity, how can I pay my other bills? So then it becomes a deciding or choosing, you know, what basic necessity I can have this month, because those bills are very high. So on a socioeconomic racial equity issue, I don't think not so much in terms of energy access. There is equitable access, and the electrification rate across the islands is about 98 to 99%. So that's very great. So access is there, there's equitable access, but then on the other hand, we have the divide of the income disparities, I would say. But in terms of access, very much equitable, but I think that's what the average person faces in the Turks and Caicos Islands on a day-to-day basis as a result of the high dependency on diesel generation.
Anyone else want to jump in on that question or move on to the next question?
Yeah, if I may add, Puerto Rico is also has an over-reliance fossil fuel generation. And I mean, for stating the obvious, but when you over-relied on fossil fuels, that exposed utility companies and therefore the consumers to the price fluctuations in in the oil market. So it's very difficult from a financial point for utilities to be able to budget and also for consumers the price of that energy that you're buying or generating.
Good point on that with Puerto Rico. Another question, but I think it's kind of an overarching question here, is how has the increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events and natural disasters that we've seen in various small island nations, including territories like Puerto Rico, change the way that you and your colleagues might be thinking about the timing and the composition of the energy transition in your respective geographies or in work on different islands? Really, how is it affecting how you think about the energy transition?
Maybe I can start to noodle on that one, and maybe somebody else can later on expand. But in our work, for example, in Puerto Rico, in fact, our work is more focused on resiliency than the other benefits of renewable energy. Of course, we know it's clean energy, and we are helping the energy transition, but we are also focusing on how do we make these communities more resilient to extreme weather events. So that's why we are trying to create this resiliency hub in communities, because I mean, experience shows that when a natural disaster strikes, you could be up to months without electricity, and then once you don't have electricity, you don't have water, you don't have cell phone, you don't have money. So how do we make communities in island nations, which are the most vulnerable in the planet, basically, because all the hurricanes are just randomly going on top of them. So yes, I think that we need to have resiliency like on the mind as much as thinking on the energy transition for island nations, or else I mean, even with installations, when we install a solar system, we are now doing it so it's prepared to withstand 180 miles per hour. That's more expensive than if I install solar systems in somewhere where we don't have that kind of wind. So yeah, definitely we need to keep in mind, and it's super important to think about the conditions that we are dealing with in the island nations. And I'll stop here, and happy to hear somebody else.
Yeah. After Hurricane Maria landed in Puerto Rico, energy resiliency has been like a big topic of conversation for policy makers. There has been a decent amount of investment, and FEMA has allocated approximately $10 billion for energy resiliency initiatives. Obviously, renewable energy is a big part of that strategy. We also need to strengthen our grid that suffer significantly from the effect of the hurricane there and the different storms after that. One of the main areas of concern, we talk about climate change and the rising of sea levels. I don't know if that's the case in the Turks and Caicos, but in Puerto Rico, most of the thermoelectrical, big plants are around the coastline. And that's because they use the seawater to cool down the engines, I guess, and the turbines that they use. So that's also an area of concern for Puerto Rico.
Yeah. I do see there's an audience question, and I will get to that one in a minute or two. I just want to make sure you know we're not ignoring this. Question on thinking forward rather than just on what has been happening up until now. In your view, what are the most promising up and coming technologies that might help islands either diversify their electricity grid or increased resilience to natural disasters overall? Perhaps it's a mix of both.
All right, that one's teed up for me. So I would say that there's, if you looked at the offshore renewable energy sector, offshore wind is the technology that's the most, promising in terms of low cost electricity delivery. And, depending on the island will depend on whether or not we're talking about fixed bottom offshore wind, or if we're talking about floating offshore wind. And because it depends on how shallow the shelf is coming off the island. So my understanding is that there are many places in the Caribbean where fixed bottom will work, but in the Pacific, that's not so much the case. So if floating is still a little ways off, so if we focus instead on our fixed bottom technologies, at scale, I think the challenges that we see are numerous, right? Even such that it's coming down quite significantly and precipitously in price, notwithstanding current financing costs. But the tricky situations here are have a lot to do with social license, and we've got potential for conflicts with tourism, right? So if you're one of the main, features of your economy is tourism, how will tourism and the siting of that electricity on, in the viewshed affect your tourism industry? I could say if you don't have electricity, that probably affects your tourism industry quite much more significantly. So, we could talk about the trade-offs there, but that's a consideration. And so and then on top of that, right, so if you look at just conventional offshore wind, there's a huge now sort of backlog of projects that are going on, right? When you've got Massachusetts and New Jersey and New York and all of these, there's about 30 megawatts of electricity in the process of permitting in the US. Plus now you've got projects getting permitted in Asia. And so if you're a small country, like how do you get a huge developer to commit resources to doing your project if it doesn't, kind of withstand like how do you get someone to look at and commit to doing your project versus the projects that they could do when they could put 1,000 megawatts in one go? Because it's much less expensive, and much less, more efficient from a personnel perspective, right? And a time perspective for them to do a larger project. And so that's an issue that I see when we're talking about using that in a small island state. Floating has the potential, looking out into the future, to be able to do smaller turbines more quickly. And so I think that's something that we should really keep our eye on. And that's going to be really led though by California. So it's being led by California and some of the, like Japan. So we'll need to keep an eye on that over the next, several years as those projects come to fruition. And of course, like the technology leaders are in Europe in this case, as in most of offshore wind. So we'll keep, there are a number of startups though coming up with some pretty cool ways to put them up that don't require these huge vessels. So big vessels is the big problem in offshore wind, right? But there's some cool startups. We have one called Aikido that basically like floats them out flat. So it like lays them flat like this, and then you can barge them out and then pop it up when you get to where you need to go. So it's not impacted by, port infrastructure and other kinds of infrastructure, like bridges often get in the way when you talk about ports and being able to get, turbines out to where they need to go. So in any case, I think there's a lot of startups working on some cool technologies to make floating offshore wind more amenable to different kinds of infrastructure, port infrastructure, et cetera.
Anyone else want in on that, or all good?
Really quick, Andrew. Well, maybe at a smaller scale, but I think that virtual power plants could take an important role in the future. I mean, when every single household is helping the grid, and some super exciting technology that I love, and it's really new. It's the direct sunlight backup systems for poor countries. I mean, this is when you have a power outage, but you still can have electricity at home directly from the sun without having a battery. That's a very new system that it's out there, and yeah, I think it's gonna have important impact in the future.
That's great. I just add one more thing. It seems, a lot of folks have talked about using wave energy or tidal energy to support small islands states, but in general, we see this as being quite a bit of a way off in terms of development, mostly because it can't compete in large scale projects at the moment. And so you're not getting the kind of investment into those technologies that you would get into technologies that can compete at a large scale. The European government is putting a lot of money into it, though. Which is the same as happened in offshore wind. So we may find that could be a technology of the future. But there's a large number of problems with using wave or tidal energy at the moment, not least of which is that things grow underwater, and any times you have joints or exposed surfaces, you end up with creatures and other things growing on them. And that's not usually great for your energy infrastructure. So that right now, the most promising areas for those kinds of technologies are really in small scale local electricity production. So if you've got an aquaculture farm or you've got some other kind of piece of infrastructure in the water, there may be an opportunity for you to use locally generated either like wave energy in order to power that facility. But we don't really see that as being a near-term opportunity for like large scale utility scale generation.
As a reporter, I can tell you that for 20 years, I've been writing stories on how tidal or wave energy projects might be the technology of the future.
No. In the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you
So at some point I just stopped writing them that way, but like it's just always in the same place. It has seemed, although the funding in Europe has significantly increased, as well as testing of a variety of technologies. I'm curious, the last question I'll ask before we go to audience questions is, what barriers to bringing new technologies are there to these geographies, so to these small island countries and territories, especially considering financing, which is obviously a big issue. And we see that maybe being addressed more at the international level with the potential revamping of the way the World Bank works. Yeah, so I'm curious about that on the financing question. And then we will go to audience questions.
Yeah, I can try to answer that. As a lawyer that has been involved in some developments and the financing aspects of this renewable energy, I can tell you it is a complicated, I would say one of the more complex financing structures that are used because you have usually lenders, you have tax equity partners that make use of the tax credits and other incentives that are out there. In the case of small islands, I was telling Alisa, after Hurricane Maria, everything changed. Insurance has been, insurance costs have been through the roof, increasing every year. And that is puts an additional burden on the financial aspects of a project and the financing. So if you add that there are, some other, let's say variables, unknown variables, with new technology, it makes it even more difficult for us as an island. Yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in on that, or? Okay. This question is for Max from the audience. Some of the measures we see implemented in the US, such as insulation and heat pumps, might not be obviously as useful in island nations. Are there any end use energy reduction technologies that are most applicable to island nations?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Well, definitely, energy efficiency is a must. I mean, before we do renewable energy, we have to do energy efficiency. Let's say in islands, it's very common that you have the air conditioning on and the windows open, right? So it's just inefficient. I mean, you're trying to cool the whole neighborhood. So definitely investing more in construction. Insulation works backwards. I mean, even if we want to cool the house and don't let the heat from the outside get in, we need to invest in good insulation, lighting systems. Yeah, so there is a lot of work to be done. Double insulated windows that also are a big issue. So yes, I think that along with renewable energy, we must implement very strong energy efficiency measures and a lot of education.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else from the audience want to pop up with a question in Q&A, or I don't know if there are microphones in the room, but there may be.
Hi, so I had a question for Juan Carlos. So in terms of the financings for a lot of these projects, like who are the investors, and like how do you I guess incentivize them to like want to like invest in these green projects, and are they classified as like green bonds or sustainability bonds, or kind of if you could go a little bit more into that, that'd be great.
Of course, and thank you. Who are the investors? Well, usually you have lenders, people, banks or hedge funds, and also they put the debt portion of the project finance, and then because there's some I would say many tax incentives within the U.S. Internal Revenue Code. You have tax equity partners, as I mentioned, that usually involve big taxpayers, usually also banks, Google or Amazon or that sort of, you can see in a project finance, you could see those guys, putting up money for a renewable energy project just to get the benefits on the tax side. That's usually the structure that I have worked with. Yeah.
Hi, my name is. Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Tarika. I'm a first year student at the Fletcher School. And I had a question, which was, it's a theme that kind of came up through a lot of conversations, which was beyond power generation and energy generation, looking at the larger ecosystem of deployment and transmission. And I think that's a huge problem we see across many countries, both developing and developed, because even after you have the solar and the wind, you still see a lot of issues with distribution. And my question is, what are the current obstacles the main obstacles you see, especially for small island nations, when it comes to the larger ecosystem? And where do you think policy plays a role in bridging this gap?
TeAnn, would you like to take that one first, or should I?
Sure, let me see how best I can dissect that. So yeah, it can still boil down to having a distribution issue, because even in the event of a catastrophic hurricane, and say that the plant itself, the generation has withstood it and it's all good and well. If your transmission lines are not up and you can't distribute, then we're still no better off than before. So that also has to be factored in. So I think we have a lot of overhead lines in terms of transmission, and I know a lot of work has been done. I mean, it's costly, but we have to rethink and rework how we do things now in terms of resiliency. So a lot of that has been moving to get transmission lines underground, so you get more resiliency, quicker recovery time sort of thing. And then on the distribution side, I think in the grand scheme of things, having microgrids will really speak to or address those issues, especially at critical facilities. So where distribution cannot get to all of the island and event, having these microgrids established at key facilities that can serve portions of the island will help energy get going again. And so we've been looking really closely at the potential for microgrids, having a more modular energy layout in terms of more, instead of having it more centralized as it is now at one central plant that's dependent on the transmission and the distribution to be up for it to work. So in the grand scheme of things, we're looking at a more modular way of providing that energy, and that will be key through the setting up of microgrids. So I think that more on the utility side. On the policy side, where the government comes in, is really giving room for that framework to develop through regulations and legislations that will allow for that, and also being a collaborative approach with the utility and the government working together on issues of such national importance as it comes to natural disasters and that sort. So I think in essence, the whole grand scheme of the energy ecosystem of the future for the Turks and Caicos Islands will definitely look at microgrids being set up, because as I mentioned, we're an archipelago of islands. So having that in each island is also critical. And then within an island, having that in areas that can feed portions of the island will be significant in helping us get the energy distributed in that fashion to avoid the sort of transmission and distribution issues that we currently see, especially when it comes to natural disasters that impact the grid.
Yeah, I agree. And Puerto Rico is following a similar strategy in terms of policy makers putting a lot of efforts into the establishment of microgrids. Right now, we have a one big, grid. And geographies also play a big role on the difficulties of when natural disasters strike. And Puerto Rico in particular it has a mountain range that goes across the island from east to the west. For some reason, I guess bad planning or something, most of the generation is in the south part of the island, while most of the people live in the north. So you have these big transmission lines going across this mountain range, and when a hurricane or a big storm hits, it could get damaged, and it takes a while to get it up and running again. So yeah, definitely microgrid is something that we're looking very, very closely to get into, additional, sectional grids and not relying on just one.
Yeah. And even just some well-placed battery storage would be helpful, right? Because it would, you could avoid building new transmission lines by, maintaining the capacity factors on your existing transmission lines by reducing the amount of peak capacity that needs to go across them, and reducing the heat stress on them by implementing batteries when the temperatures are really high. And so there's a variety, even before you get to full microgrid type status, to implementing some of the advanced energy storage systems to help alleviate that. Batteries as a technology has gone through like a very, there was a huge proliferation of startups in battery energy technologies, and you're going to give me PTSD if I have to talk too much about them. But the space, I think, is shook out quite a bit in terms of the technologies that are being implemented and are financeable now, right? And so they've gotten past in the last 10 years some of the financing hurdles, and they don't have the same social license issues either as new transmission lines do, which is a really nice feature.
We have a couple more questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for this panel on a really underrepresented but exciting issue. If we could, if you folks could kind of touch on the, I guess, the qualities, and it's hard to really kind of personify every single small island country, but yeah, the qualities that are inherent to us that really, there's a lot of groundswell that's kind of untapped, coming from the Oceania region, right? Our communal bonds, intimate relations with nature. There's just so much potential there for a groundswell. TeAnn, thank you so much for mentioning empowerment, right? There's a lot of ways where these small microgrids could be empowering for small rural communities that are quote unquote isolated, but really have these amazing integrations. So I guess our particular qualities that are positive and can be integrated into this conversation about clean renewable energy.
Should we just take a few questions and then we're running out of time?
Yeah, so I have a question related more to technology. So I was curious about where the technology stands as far as climate resilience with renewable technologies. Like, are the people who are designing wind turbines and offshore wind turbines considering like hurricane force winds in the design? And like, if so, is that being tested? Because it's already challenging to get investment for small island nations for renewable systems, especially considering climate issues. So I was just curious kind of where that stood.
Hi, thank you. My name is Camille. I'm from the Bahamas, and I'm a student here studying environmental policy and planning with a focus on energy transitions within the region, primarily the Bahamas, and with an emphasis on equity within those transitions. A question was previously asked, and another one, I believe, but I'm curious, as the region and as small island states move towards this energy transition, how are stakeholders, politicians, regulators, social residents, thinking through how do we transition, but at the same time embed equity into these transitions, and how, or where would you say the priority is in the focus around which issue areas we address first? I know that there are political, economic, social, and technical challenges at various issues, but moving forward, where would you say or recommend for someone personally working to develop a framework, where do you say that the importance lies in sort of, I guess, accelerating this transition as we have different energy goals 2 years away from Puerto Rico's 2025 goal, for example, 10 years away from the Bahamas 30 by 33% energy transition goal? I'd like to know. Thank you.
Hi, also Max, just quickly, I would appreciate it if you could talk a little bit about the blended finance mechanisms that you talked about, specifically as they relate to the end consumer, because I think that is very important when it relates to like equity issues and access issues. That's all the questions. That's all the questions. We can take them, you know, in any order that y'all prefer. I know this is a lot of content. I apologize. We just dumped it all on you. But thank you so much for addressing as many as you possibly can.
Andrew, if you allow me, I could try to respond to the last two questions in a single response.
Go for it.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the great questions. Well, at least we think at RMI that equity is a super important aspect in the energy transition. We have like two ways of thinking about this, right? You have the ones that are pushing for super large power plants in renewable, of course, renewable power plants. But also you could do this by installing small PV systems at home, right? So we support both. We think we need to have a good combination of both, but we need to be careful not to go too much into any of the sides, right? For example, there are countries like the Dominican Republic who do not support rooftop solar, and they want to have these huge power plants that will be all owned by huge investors, multi-billion-dollar investments, but you will have still the poor people paying for their expensive electricity for years to come. What if we put solar panels on people's rooftops and we allow them to participate from the energy generation market and benefit directly from that? I mean, you could reduce almost to zero the energy burden of the poorest people. So why not do that? So we need to do that. Just another example, touching on the blended finance mechanism, you have the Dominican Republic spending $2 billion on electric subsidies. That means the government helps you pay for your electric bill. So, and they have been doing it for a long time. They will be doing it forever if we don't change things. So we just learned that if you invest 3 years of the energy subsidy, you can help people in a blended finance mechanism, help people install systems. That means you pay, the government pays for a part of the system, and the client, the user, pays for the rest through a loan. But you will pay less than what you pay today for electricity, even less than the subsidized electricity, and the subsidy will disappear because once you get this family to produce their own electricity, you don't need to subsidize them forever. So yeah, I mean, blended finance and equity are things that we need to explore more. And of course, we support the large multi-billion investments and power plants, but we just don't have to forget about people in low to middle income communities and just help them a little bit. I mean, renewable energy, it's just incredible at improving your family economy if you are able to do it. And over to somebody else.
If I can, yeah, social economic issues related to energy access is I mean, it could take hours to discuss here. But just to point, two factors that policymakers need to consider. One is obviously the rising cost of energy has a bigger impact on these communities. But also when a natural disaster like a storm or a hurricane strike, communities in remote areas are are addressed at the very at the very end of the whole emergency process. And for example, in Puerto Rico, many of these remote communities had to spend a year or more without having any energy. I live in the San Juan area, and I was one of the lucky ones. I was able to get power back in 2 months. Okay, during those 2 months, well, we were relying on diesel generators or gas generators. All these communities in remote areas, you can imagine they spend a whole year buying diesel to get their refrigerators running. So it's definitely an important issue that has to be addressed. Yeah.
And if I may quickly follow up, I believe the question from the student from the Bahamas is a panel topic on its own, but I will try very quickly to be concise in the response from in terms of the Turks and Caicos Islands, and in my opinion. So I think foundational to anything that we're doing in terms of energy transition will be the planning process, which is why the integrated resource planning or the resilient energy national transition strategy that we've moved to now is so critical to how we move forward. And in that planning process, it's collaborative with the government and the electricity service providers as the main and key stakeholders to strike a balance. And so it was decided that for that iteration of the study, the priority areas were least cost, and it was ranked. So the number one was least cost, then reliability, then resilience, and then sustainability, to come up with 100% weight in terms of how we plan going forward. And so having that is foundational to how we move forward. And I think right now, where we have a draft RE bill that will be advancing shortly, it was key to get a lot of input from those major stakeholders to make sure that balance is achieved within this legislative piece of work that will be advanced to support how the industry moves forward. And so we've had a chance to really dive deep into that. And we're wrapping up now on that as we work to advance that. And I think on a project perspective, as we move forward with project preparations and how we target that, both from the utility and the government's perspective, in my opinion, I think focus should be put on critical facilities and vulnerable communities in terms of how we deploy and really develop going forward. But I think the bottom line and the end goal for all involved is to reduce the cost of energy to the population. So very quickly, but trust me, this can go really in depth very quickly. So that's what I would add to that for right now.
Anybody else wanted to say any closing thoughts? And no more questions in the room? I think you guys summarized them. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time. I had a question for Elisa, actually. Just wanted to get a sense from you, if you could
share about some of the examples of the kinds of work that you've been, supporting through like your portfolio of investments in terms of what are some of these like local innovations that you're seeing within, the whole, the blue ocean space that you work in. I think that'll be interesting just for everyone to hear.
Great. So an example of one that's has a relationship to energy. We made an investment in the fall in a company called Matrix. They're out of North Carolina, and they're working. They have a novel 3D printer for concrete, and they're making intricate concrete structures for use in coastal restoration. So you can put these specifically designed for that specific location structures underwater, and they attract nature to grow in the on top of them or around them. They also depending on how they were designed can cause siltation, which will then cause the local native grasses or depending on where we're talking about to grow back. And so the opportunity is there for both coastal restoration and for creating, potentially in the future, more biodiverse habitat around offshore wind farms. And so that's a way that, the offshore wind farm community is not monolithic, but many of the players in this space consider their impact on the ocean to be something that they would like to spend more time thinking about and addressing. And so that's one area where, these are known to be reef creating structure, right? Like anytime you stick something in the water, life blooms around it essentially. And so what could they be doing in order to enhance that effect around their offshore wind farms? And so that's something that we're interested in working with Matrix on. We've seen a ton of underwater, I would say underwater permitting and inspection related technologies. There's actually a spin out from Tufts that went through our incubator 2 years ago called Sea Deep. And they are doing using a hyperspectral imaging technology for getting a better sense for what is actually on the seafloor, because you can't see it very well. And so if you want to do automated inspection, you can use different light, different kinds of light in order to get that information where the visible spectrum is not so reliable. So that's just, 2 examples of companies that have come through, but we've supported over 130 companies in the last 5 years. And we've graduated 3 cohorts of our incubator. We've got 1 more going right now, which is our Gulf Coast program. And then, and the investors have made 22 investments through our platform now. So, so it's very active. I'm going to make a little shout out. We actually have, I think, 6 internship positions open for the summer. So check out Handshake. Just a little plug right there.
Awesome. It's a good plug and an appropriate time for that. Well, I think that wraps things up. I can't see beyond into the crowd in the room, but I just want to thank all the participants for this interesting discussion. I learned a lot, and I again, I'm sorry I can't be there. I wish I was. But thank you, and have a good rest of this conference. This is a really cool program. And I liked, a lot of these comments from people. I got some story ideas, so I may be following up with some of you. So thank you, and have a good weekend.
Thank you.